Good afternoon, everyone. We are just about got enough chairs. We brought a few through, so I hope you're all comfortable. I'd like to welcome you to the third, and for this semester, the last of the Library Lunchtime lectures. Our speaker today, Dr. Dilek Mutlu from the Graphic Design Department, will give us, I hope, a very interesting talk entitled A Different Story of Secularism, the Censorship of Religion in Turkish Films of the 1960s. Dilek, as many of you know, is an assistant professor in the Department of Graphic Design, and for us, very importantly as well, she's also the library representative for her department. However, she started life as an economist, which I found out a few days ago. She's in fact a graduate from Bilkent's econ department, but during her undergraduate days, she became increasingly interested in film and cinema, and in 1997 she entered the graduate program in graphic design here and completed her PhD in 2002. She did some research also in Brock University in Ontario, Canada, and then returned in 2003 to Bilkent, where she's been teaching ever since. Her research focuses on popular Turkish film and cinema of the 60s and 70s, amongst other things, especially I can see from the kind of social and cultural perspective. So it's putting film into a kind of a context, which obviously as an historian I can see is very important. She's published various important articles in this field, as well as a book examining the international reception of the famous, or perhaps I should say infamous, film The Midnight Express, and we have a copy of that book displayed upstairs in the cabinet if you wish to see. Film and cinema seem to have dominated Dilek's personal as well as professional life. She met her future husband while attending meetings of the Bilkent Cinema Club, so very important for her in all respects. Her topic today, I think, is important in definitely two very big ways. Obviously, historically, it's important as a subject for studying Turkey, in a sense, in the 1960s, but also it touches upon issues and concerns that we still have today, obviously in Turkey, issues of religion, censorship and so on, very important, particularly with reference to the internet. So some of the themes that she will mention will, I hope, set kind of bells off, familiar points off for all of us as we listen. Okay, Dilek says her talk will take about 40 minutes, so I'm going to be quiet now, pass over the little microphone, let her take over, and I hope by the end we will have some time for questions and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for this kind introduction, and thank you all for coming. As you all know, secularism is one of the founding principles of Turkish Republic, but during the 86 years of the Republic, secularism has been maybe the only principle that has been so much debated, discussed, and contested, both in the political arena and everyday life. My focus today will be on the 1960s, which was an important period not only in the history of Turkish secularism but also in the history of Turkish cinema. And my purpose is mainly to extend this discussion of Turkish secularism from political history to cultural history, and to explore some applications of secularist ideology in state intervention in cinema in the 1960s. And I think this topic is a good case to understand how Turkish secularism operates in practice. And it also provides an opportunity to understand the complexities of Turkish secularism, right, which is still a debated issue. But before moving to the issue of censorship, I want to begin with a bit political history, just in order to provide a background for the following discussion. And I apologize from those who are already familiar with this political history, right? But it will be just a very sketchy and quick overview of some political developments, right, in Turkey since the establishment of the Turkish Republic. This is a cartoon by Cemal Nadir depicting the story of Turkish Republic from its establishment to Atatürk's death. And it is like a visual summary of some of the major reforms that the Republican government undertook to secularize, modernize, and westernize the country. And actually all these terms meant one and the same thing at that time. And for me, this cartoon shows very well how the founders of the Republic and the modernizing elite saw Islam as a marker of this backward Oriental identity, and believed that in order to modernize, secularize the country, they had to remove the influence of Islam from their societies. So the Republican state rejected Islam as a national marker, but it also soon realized that Islam, which had provided both the governing and living principles in the country for centuries, could not be eliminated completely from social life. Therefore, rather than excluding religion altogether, the state chose to keep it under its strict control. And this is what distinguishes Turkish secularism from Western models of secularism. Because secularism in Turkey is not the separation of religion of the state, but it is actually the subordination of religion to the state. For instance, in 1924, I guess, this Directorate of Religious Affairs was founded, right, to administer and regulate religious belief and worship in the public sphere, right? And we still debate the presence of such an institution, right, such a state office in a secular state. So that was one aspect of this attempt to keep religion under control, right, especially in the public sphere. And on the other hand, the state, the Republican state, attempted to discursively construct an official version of Islam, a Turkish Islam, let's say, that would be compatible with a modern secular worldview, right? And that would implant the new ideas and ideals of the Republic. And this is a passage from a religion textbook of the 1920s. And if you read it, I mean, you see that it posits even the Prophet as a promoter of modernity and secularism, right? And it gives the message that the primary duty of a Muslim was to be a modern citizen, right? And that's all. So, I mean, I can say that, as you might already know, the Kemalist secularism wanted to push religion out of the public sphere, and it attempted religion only as a matter of personal conscience, right? As a private affair. And a radical secularism continued until the mid-1940s. And in 1950, after the transition to a multi-party system, the Democrat Party came to power. And it came with a slogan, right? Enough, the nation or the people has the word, right? And that was a response to the previous, ruling party, that is Atatürk's Republican People's Party. And the Democrat Party believed in a less repressive secularism. And for instance, in 1932, right, the Arabic call to prayer was banned in Turkey, and it was replaced with a Turkish translation. And the Democrat Party, I mean, restored the call to prayer to its original Arabic version as soon as it came to power. Right, and this was highly welcomed by the people because, the return to Arabic call to prayer marked the end of the tyranny of the Republican People's Party, right, the previous ruling party. And this also found a reflection in cinema. For instance, the call to prayer was a common element a common element in the village melodramas of the 1950s, köy melodramları in Turkish. And these were also called göbek mezar ezan filmleri, like belly dancing, cemetery, and ezan films, right, in the critical discourse, because these were the most repeated elements in those films. And also in the 50s, right, in cinema, the movie theater, I mean, in some extreme cases, right, the movie theater could turn into a place of religious ritual. For instance, it was, in the 50s, the number of people, for example, the number of people making pilgrimages to Mecca rose, right, a lot. And in Anatolia, audiences were invited to watch a film called Hajj Yolu, Road to Pilgrimage, 7 times in order to become a Haji, a pilgrim, without going to Mecca, right? And it was also reported that the audiences, this is what we read from newspapers, but the audiences were, they performed ablution, abdest almak, and then walk around the movie theater 7 times before watching the film. And they were also served rose water during the entr'acte, right? This is an interesting anecdote about this, the incorporation of religious motives into cinema. So back to the political history, the Democrat Party really followed a liberal policy towards religious expression and religious groups, including the Sufi orders, right, that were outlawed in 1925. And the 50s witnessed a religious revival until a major actor in Turkish politics stepped in, the army, right? And in May 1960, the Democrat Party government was overthrown by the military. And then, after a period of coalition government supervised by the secularist military, the Justice Party came to power, right? And it was a continuation of the Democrat Party in terms of its liberal and populist attitude towards religion, right? And the Justice Party remained in power until March 1971, when the military intervened once again. So how did this, let me check the time. So how did this struggle over religion and secularism echo in the domain of culture, right, in the 60s? Or let's say in the state's regulation of culture, namely cinema. And here let me note here that the 1960s, was an important period, not only in the history of Turkish secularism, but also in the history of Turkish cinema, because these were the golden years of Turkish cinema in terms of film production and movie attendance. About 200 to 300 films were made a year. And these films came from, they belonged to a variety of genres. And movie-going was a principal leisure activity of the masses at that time. So I think the cinema constituted a very important domain of identity formation and negotiation. And this is also acknowledged by the very institution of censorship. So how did the state then, the censorship is an extension of, attempted to regulate or transform the representation of religion in films. And I will try to answer this question based on the reports of the Central Film Control Commission. I think the Turkish title, right, is more fascinating. Merkez Film Kontrol Komisyonu. So I will be looking at the reports of this commission. And the commission was responsible for the control of domestic films and for re-examining some foreign films rejected by another control commission in Istanbul. Let me say that this commission no longer exists, and film censorship in Turkey is almost, non-existent. But this censorship of films in the 60s and 70s, I believe, constitute a very important part of this long history of censorship in Turkey. So just maybe a few notes about the commission, the censorship commission. Well, it's comprised 5 members, and if you look at their identities, right, you see that films were censored mainly by the government, the police, and the military. So these reports really, provide useful but completely unexplored sources for exploring the state's attitude towards religion, as well as to various other issues. And films were inspected based on a regulation introduced in 1939. And in order to gain the Commission's approval, a film should avoid 10 items. And they are there if you can, if you want to read. And these were also known as the 10 commandments of Turkish film censorship. And based on these 10 criteria, the Commission, via majority voting, might accept or reject a film or ask for some revisions, sometimes describing specifically how a scene should be shot, what the characters should or should not say, how the film should end, and so on. And actually a critic in the 1960s, argued that, a film critic, right, in the 60s, he argued that Turkish films should be seen as co-productions because they are made together with the board of censors. So the criteria, if you read them, you see that these were not only very nationalistic, but also so vague and paranoid that almost any film could be rejected if the Commission desired. And I had a chance to read about 1,500 of these reports, and they are really full of very interesting censorship cases, right, relating to a variety of issues, from the censorship of obscenity to the censorship of communist propaganda, anti-militarism, and so on. So in the rest of my talk, I will just talk about the censorship of religious elements in films, but I think you can get an idea about the general mentality of the Commission, right, and their approach to other issues as well. So, yeah, so when we look at the reports, we see, throughout the 1960s, even during the tenure of the Justice Party government, we see a very strict reaction towards religious elements in secular films set in modern times. And this is important, this distinction. And by secular films, I refer to films which didn't have any religious topic, right? Like the films you see below. I don't know if, whether everybody can see them, but these are normal films, just set in modern day Turkey and so on. So, and the Commission didn't want to see any of these religious elements in those films, like the ritual prayer, call to prayer, references to the Quran, and so on. And this reaction, right, I think could be seen as an expression of the secular idea of pushing religion out of the public sphere, right? So the Commission didn't want to see religion just intervening in public life, in normal everyday life. But the Hoca, the perception Hoca was a bit different. The image of the Hoca, preacher, was tolerated as long as it served to affirm the Republican ideology and discourse, which encoded his religion as an obscurantist and reactionary force, and thus an obstacle to modernization and progress. And the supreme example of this negative perception of the Hoca, preacher, is seen in the film Vurun Kahpeye, Beat the Beach. Well, maybe I should summarize the story a little bit, right? The film tells the story of Aliye, an idealist female teacher. She's already, a symbol of the modern enlightenment Turkey. And she's, by the way, the film is set during the Turkish War of Independence. And Aliye is appointed to an Anatolian village. And there she suffers a lot from the conservative villagers, especially from Hacı Fettah, and an obscurantist, pro-Sultan, and also pro-Greek preacher, right? And he's just the embodiment of everything that the Republican regime wanted to eliminate, right? And the Hoca, Hacı Fettah, sees Aliye as immoral because she is unveiled, and he provokes the villagers, and at the end of the movie, the villagers stone Aliye to death. So the film has a very tragic end. And when inspecting the film, well, there are 3 versions of the film, but I'll just talk about the 1964 version. When inspecting that film, the commission stayed silent about the portrayal of the Hoca, which, as I said, confirmed the Republican discourse, right? And this Kemalist discourse. But it still accepted the film on some conditions. It accepted the film, the commission accepted the film on the condition that its Muslim hymns, ilahiler, there were some Muslim hymns in the movie, right? And so the commission said that, these should be either removed or replaced with a march expressing the nationalist feelings of the time. And also the commission, asked that the cries of Allahu Ekber, Allah is the greatest, right, should be removed, right? And I think it is obvious that here we see again this Kemalist maybe ideology, right, which interpolates the citizens of Turkey as nationalist Turks, right, before being Muslims. But while the censorship commissions were resistant towards references to religion in secular films, they disapproved of rebelling against Allah, God, right, or slighting his greatness and respectability. And dialogues such as these, right, I hope the English translations make sense because it was difficult for me to translate some of these, right, and dialogues such as these were rejected, right. They were rejected on the grounds that they contradicted our national and moral values. And so, I think we can say that, despite its strict stand on the secularization of social life, the state did not promote irreligion, but it attempted to redefine the place of religion in society. And so religion was affirmed, or Islam, let's say, was affirmed as long as it stayed as a private faith, as a private and abstract belief in Allah. So maybe we can say that, the commissions were not against private Islam as a faith, but they were against a public and more political Islam. But a more positive attitude is observed in the control of historical religious films, which depicted the lives of prophets or saints, some Muslim saints, and these were also called Hazretli filmler, films with Hazrats. And Hazrat is a title of respect used for prophets and some important figures in Islam. And these films, they constitute a popular trend that peaked in Turkish cinema in 1965, the year when the Justice Party came to power. And these films, many of these historical religious films were accepted despite the fact that they included all those religious elements that were prohibited in secular films, like the call to prayer, the Quran, the Imam, preacher, and so on. These are some other films. But interestingly, the foreign film, 10 Commandments, right, was rejected on the grounds of propagating religion. At first look, the acceptance of these films suggests a shift, in the state's attitude towards religion in films. I don't know if you agree with me, but can we say that, the acceptance of these films, which included, lots of religious items and so on, suggests a shift in the Commission's attitude towards religion in films under the influence of the Justice Party government? Do you think so? I don't agree with you. And yeah, this is a complicated issue. Maybe I'm pushing it, too much, but I think this attitude still, it still parallels Kemalist secularism because it confines religion to a mythical past, right? And so, I mean, in 1965, for example, right, various films were rejected. I mean, secular. I mean, if religion, right, was seen in a secular film, in a set in modern times, I mean, it was rejected, right? So I want to repeat here that the commissions did not have an issue with Islam, but with its placement, right? And these films placed it to a mythical past, right? And if a historical religious film was rejected, that was because it included some kind of mistake, some kind of religious mistake, right? For instance, Mevlüt Süleyman Çelebi was rejected on the grounds that Mevlüt wasn't recited in the right melodic and rhythmic pattern. And Mevlüt is the poems written to praise the Prophet's birth, his life and virtues, and so on. And it was also rejected on the grounds that the pronunciation of some Quranic verses were wrong. And this film came to the commission, several times between 1962 and 63, each time some corrections and revisions, but the commission wasn't satisfied with those corrections, but in the end, they accepted the film. And they said, well, the actor did his best. There are still some problems with the recitation of Mevlüt, but okay, we accept it, but on the condition that it won't be screened abroad. Right? It was the fate of the film. Another important thing, I think, is that the majority of the historical religious films rejected for religious mistakes were films about Alevi Islam or films about, let's say, important figures in Alevi Islam. And this is a large sect, within Islam and Turkey, and it is different from the Sunni Islam. For instance, the Turkifiers of Anatolia, Anadolu'yu Türkleştirenler, or Hacı Bektaş Veli, a very important figure in Anatolian Alevism, right, was rejected because it included many religious mistakes, and some of them are listed there. And I mean, it seems to me that some of those so-called mistakes are even debatable in Sunni Islam, like for example, performing ablution while standing. I don't know, is there such a rule in Sunni Islam? Anyway, I think it is quite debatable, or talking during the call to prayers recitation and so on. So these could be debatable, but overall, when I look at the mistakes, right, identified in films about Alevi Islam, I see that the commissions evaluated those films based on the principles of Sunni Islam, right, and disregarded Alevis, different interpretations of the fundamentals of Islam, right, and as well as their more liberal understanding of religious matters. Maybe just a parenthesis here. Sometimes the correction while trying to correct those mistakes, the filmmakers came up with quite clever solutions, right? I think this is, another interesting point which I don't, examine in depth in my work. But for example, I want to show you a very short clip, right? Just to show you how the filmmakers corrected this mistake listed here as reading the Quran without reciting Bismillah, right? Saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And here you see Hacı Bektaş Veli on the left, right? And he's going to read the Quran. If I can show it. Just see how, you know, they corrected that so-called mistake. A very short clip. I hope you can hear the sound.
Biraz Kur'an okumak istiyorum.
I want to read Quran. Can you hear? Okay, I mean, have you noticed anything wrong in the soundtrack? So, yeah, obviously, I mean, they simply, but what are you going to do? I mean, filmmaking is an expensive process, right? So rather than shooting the scene again and letting the character say Bismillah and so on, they simply inserted it as an overvoice, right? So there's a jump in the soundtrack, right, in the overvoice. But I don't know, maybe based on such examples, we can say that, you know, censorship had some productive sides as well, right? They forced the filmmakers to be, you know, clever and so on. And another film was Allah's Lion, Hazreti Ali, yani, Ali Allah's Lion, and Ali is, you know, another very important figure in Alevi Islam. Again, I mean, the commission identified many mistakes, but in addition, you know, the commission felt uncomfortable with the representation of Ali, and also with some, you know, violent scenes and dialogue in the movie. Therefore, it's discourse on Muslim morality, like by saying, you know, Islam forbids Muslim people to kill each other and so on. I think this is important, and this is my last example about Alevi, you know, films about Alevi Islam. Here again, right, in addition to some mistakes, you see a reaction towards hate-related dialogue in the movie. I mean, which were used in fight scenes, like in the name of Allah, in the name of Muhammad, in the name of Ali, let's fight for Ali, and so on. And similar films were rejected in other periods as well. I mean, in the 50s, in the 70s. So we always see a sensitivity towards violence in those films about Alevi Islam. But it seems to me that this sensitivity, I mean, to violence in those films wasn't an innocent attempt to keep social peace and harmony, but it was an attempt to preserve the Sunni hegemony, because, I mean, and the officially recognized, right, Sunni hegemony, because, I mean, this sensitivity disregards the fact that for many Alevis, the Alevi history is a chain of tragedies, right, is a chain of collectively suffered, I brought this from someone else, collectively suffered injustices, right, and beginning with the Battle of Karbala. And there were films about Karbala battle, and all of these were rejected by the commission, I mean, on the grounds that they could lead to clashes between different sects in Turkey, mainly between the Sunnis and the Alevis. And the only theme that that was rejected both in secular and historical religious films was the depiction of folk Islam or heterodox Islam, unofficial Islam. Right? For instance, visits to sacred tombs or prayers at sacred tombs, turbes, were seen as you know, exploiting religious feelings, and references to superstitious beliefs such as magic and miracles, and even metaphorical references to tarikats, to Sufi orders, which were outlawed, right, during the early Republican era, were seen as socially harmful because they transgressed reason and blurred the distinction between religion and superstition, right? So we see here an attempt to protect not only the modern secular society, but also an attempt to protect a true Islam, right? And Also, I think it must be noted here that the Sufi orders and folk Islam also represented the social and political side of Islam, and these were seen, I mean, by the Kemalists, right? These Sufi orders and heterodox Islam, right? So they represented the social and political side of Islam and were seen as reactionary and subversive, right? So it seems to me that the censorship commissions rejected these, right? This folk Islam to keep this subversive force under control, right? But they did this under the disguise of protecting a kind of true Islam. So all these instances of censorship, I mean, these will be my, that part will be my, brief conclusions about what I said so far. I mean, all these instances of censorship suggest that Commission members saw themselves not only as guards of secularism, but also of a true Turkish Islam, right? A personal, apolitical, enlightenment, right? And national Islam. And it is observed that throughout the 1960s, the censorship commissions generally conformed to Kemalist secularism. And this is interesting, I guess, right? Even during the during the tenure of the Justice Party government, right? Those commissions generally conformed to Kemalist secularism and accepted Islam as a private belief in Allah and as a set of rules concerning religious worship, but negated Islam's social function as part and principle of modern public life. And when religion was allowed to be portrayed in films, it was either as a sign of obscurantism and reactionism, or as a cultural and traditional element that symbolized a mythic past that should nevertheless be remembered correctly. Yet, to the censorship commissions, Islam, when cleared of superstition and separated from politics and modern public life, still constituted an essential element of collective identity, right? So, I mean, based on all this, I can argue that these reports really constitute an opportunity to understand the complexities of Turkish secularism, I mean, which is still a debated issue. I want to conclude by, just finish, let me say, by mentioning two control cases in 1970 which point to to a significant shift in the state's attitude towards religion in films. And the first case is, the first control case is about Umut, this famous film, Yılmaz Güney film, Hope. And again, for those who are not familiar with the film, just I will summarize the story a little bit. Umut, it tells the story of Jabbar, performed by Yılmaz Güney, and he's a very poor cart driver, at arabası sürücüsü, right? And he struggles to make a living, I mean, to support his large family. And when his horse, his only means of earning a living, right, gets, hit by a car, he just follows the advice of a friend and begins to search for a buried treasure. And he becomes more and more dependent, and he begins to search for the treasure under the guidance of a local preacher, Hoca, right? And he becomes more and more dependent on the visions and directions of the Hoca, which do not bring the treasure but more misery, right? And so my reading of the film is as follows. I mean, the film encodes Jabbar's decision to follow the Hoca rather than taking direct, social and political action as false consciousness. For instance, at some point in the film, Jabbar rejects to take part, rejects to participate in a cart driver's strike. right? So, and he continues to, follow the Hoca. So, and the film encodes this as false consciousness into the hands of such, local preachers, Hojas, and leads them to seek salvation in superstition and false hopes. So this is my reading of the film, but the commission, the Censorship Commission, decoded the film in a totally different way and rejected it on many, many grounds. Remember, there were 10 criteria, right, in that censorship regulation, and the commission thought that the film violated 5 of these, right? And I will just talk about the censorship, about the issue of religion. About religion, the commission argued that the film promoted superstitious beliefs and ridiculed religious worship and religious functionaries by showing the Hoca praying during sunrise. Well, similar corrections were made to other films as well, right? But for the first time, the commission interpreted this act of praying during sunrise not as a mistake, but as ridiculing religion and religious functionaries. And so, it seems to me that the Commission's strict reaction to Umut was actually a reaction to Yılmaz Güney's Marxist identity and the Marxist messages in the film. So we see, how when faced with the threat, this threat of Marxism, religion becomes something to defend. And the other control case, and I'll finish in 2 minutes, I guess. The same year when Umut was banned, the commission, a censorship commission, accepted Birleşen Yollar, Uniting Roads, by Yücel Çakmaklı. And this film was set in the present, right? It is not a historical religious film and so on. And it was set in modern Turkey, and it told the story of Feyza, a rich, modern, westernized, degenerate girl, right? And performed by Türkan Şoray. You see her here, right? This is the degenerate, westernized version of Türkan Şoray. And, but she's, she is influenced by a pious boy, a university boy, right? And he's a pious boy, to happily adopt Islamic way of life, even to wear hijab, right? And you see here Türkan Şoray becoming, or Feyza becoming a devoted Muslim woman, right? With hijab and so on. So, I think we can see this film as a critique of Turkish, modernization and westernization, and as a promotion of Islamic way of life, right, in modern Turkey. And for instance, Feyza at some point in the film tells Bilal, you showed me the true way, the true happiness. I found the true way with the help of you. Thanks a lot, things, and so on. So the film promoted the Islamic way of life, right, in modern Turkey, and it also became the pioneer of this Islamic, or sometimes called national, right, cinema movement in the 1970s. But the film was accepted. The commission didn't see any problem in the movie. So this shifting attitude towards religion in films, beginning in 1970, seems to be related to anxieties over the rise of the radical left, beginning in the late 1960s, and to the mobilization of religion, Islam, as an antidote to ideological division, especially to communism. And I argue that this was an early sign of some social and political developments in Turkey that would pave the way for the revitalization of Islam during the 1980s and 1990s, and would finally culminate with the still continuing hegemony of the pro-Islamic or Islamist or conservative, whatever you prefer, Justice and Development Party. I'll just stop here. Thanks a lot for your patience.
Thank you, Dilek. We have 4 minutes for questions. I want to make one brief comment just before I throw it open to you all. I don't know if the actual big members of the commission watched all these movies, but obviously it was quite a good time to be a member of the Turkish establishment because they must have spent a lot of it watching films, I suppose. I know they had people for them, I hope, or something. Okay, do we have any questions or points? We have a few minutes there. Okay, young lady over there.
Burcu. Burcu.
Burcu.
Yeah.
I have some questions about the
Shift.
First of all, I'm trying to put these in order now. I remember one of the slides where you put the parts that were banned. Like one of them was Allah, Öğle Allah olmaz, and the other were like similar terms, which I don't really know about. But it seems to me that actually, I'm questioning this shift, whether there is actually a shift, with the thinking of the Arabics, it was still the question of politicalism. Islam being both sides of like Arabic Islam and Sunni Islam, that was a political issue with Islam. That was being banned. Again, it was a political Islam that was Islam versus communism, let's say. But with the Islam Nazi on the other side, it was again, Islam was already confined in this like private sphere. Already it was like the private issue of people that was like it wasn't banned anymore. So and also with the limitations that were in the flood, that they were like very bad mistakes, but they were actually demeaning to Islam. That's what I thought. Like, I don't remember all of them now, but actually they were. It seemed to me like the censorship attitude were these films. Well, yes, there was some sort of like censoring of Islam, but in the political sense, and not Islam per se, where any sort of deeming, let's say, deeming in their own perspective thing about Islam would still be like banned or censored in the pretext of being a mistake. Whereas when it's an issue of politics or stuff like that, then it's like, yes, it has some like nuances that become like demeaning and stuff like that. But as a whole, actually, I don't see that much of a shift except when it's an issue of like political or private sphere, like something like that.
But remember, I mean, in those, the rejection of those dialogues, right? They were rejected because they contradicted our national and moral values. So Islam is seen, but maybe it is a kind of, again, I mean, as a private faith, maybe a kind of nominal Islam, right? It is seen, yeah, it has always been seen, right, as a part of this Turkish identity, right? So, I mean, I think it would be impossible for this film, right, to pass censorship in the early 60s or in the mid 60s and so on, because here we really see the promotion of Islam, I mean, in public life as Islam as a source of identity, right? It becomes, I mean, a means for expressing your identity everywhere, not only at home, but in the public sphere as well. And so I suppose that would be rejected in the early 60s or in the mid 60s, but then it suddenly passed, right, in the 70s. I don't know, I see a shift, but maybe we can talk about it later.
Okay, we might squeeze one little comment or question in if we have time. Anyone got a short comment? Okay,
I hope it's going to be short again. I wonder what you think about today's position. You said the censorship in cinema is minimal.
Yeah, it is almost non-existent. I mean, if you look at the movies, right, I don't know, you see almost everything. And also, you know, yeah, there isn't a regulation like that, right? This regulation is no longer valid. It is not used. there is a commission, but it is totally different. I mean, it includes members from the government, but also from the art world, from the cinema world, and so on. So it is totally different. I mean,
We have said, as far as I remember, for an Oscar nomination, a film that questions...
Takva.
Yes, questions of basic fundamental fundamentalism. And we have on TV films that have series that have religious aspects, and they combine mystical powers with like from...
Like in Samanyolu and in
correct.
those TV channels.
Yes. I think we see every kind of...
Yeah.
So it is like, can we connect it with the liberal economy? What sells is...
But I think Islam has, today the situation is different. I mean, I think the secularists lost that battle. I mean, Islam is, quite visible, and it expresses itself very well in the public sphere, right, today. And this, I mean, occurred especially after the military intervention in 1980, and the generals, they especially promoted this, Islam,
You see this
as a solution, right? They developed this Turkish Islamic synthesis and so on, and we witnessed a religious revival, right? I mean,
Okay,
I think
thank
so.
you, Dilek. Let me thank Dilek again.
Thanks so much.
I would also like briefly to thank the members of the library staff who've worked very hard for the lectures this semester. Burcu, Ulku, Tenses, Tarek and Özcan Bey and others who have helped with this, and obviously most importantly those of you who have come. I'd like to invite you all tonight. We have the opening of a new exhibition which you can see around here. Bedri Rahmi, Uyup Ulu and his students here. This is opening at 6 o'clock. Otherwise, I wish you all a happy Christmas and happy New Year. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was brilliant.